cold case dating back nearly a half century appears to have been cracked this week. Investigators in Pennsylvania arrested David Sinopoli in the 1975 murder of 19-year-old Lindy Sue Biechler.
They matched Sinopoli's biological thumbprint back to that 1975 crime scene. But how they used that DNA to find him might surprise you.
In 1975, Lindy Sue Biechler, then 19 years old, was starting her life in full. She had recently married the guy of her dreams, had a job she loved, and was a new mother. On December 5, 1975, however, something bizarre happened which turned her life into a complete opposite. Lindy left her job's parking lot at the same time as her companion, performed a few errands, and then returned to her apartment. When Lindy's aunt and uncle paid a visit to the flat, they found Lindy dead inside before 9 o'clock. Initial reports indicated that, though there were no indications of a robbery, Lindy had been sexually assaulted. She had a happy life and had a lot of time to live. Who was so cruel to have taken her life so brutally? What all had taken place that day? How did a coffee cup turn out to solve her case 45 years later? Welcome to Bizarre Cases. I'm Joel, and now we're exploring the Lindy Sue Biechler case and how a coffee cup helped solve the 45-year-old cold case. Without any further ado, let's walk out onto the edge of the unknown. The landscape of Lancaster County is well known across the world. The city is unusual and exceptional because of its rich architectural heritage and rural beauty. The county is bustling with unique stores, lining old streets and captivating art galleries. What happened on December 5, 1975, however, was something Lancaster had never seen before. During the time in question, Biechler and her husband were living in the Manor Township community's Spring Manor apartments. On 5th December, Lindy had returned home after some grocery shopping and had kept the bags on the table. When her aunt and uncle dropped by their niece's apartment to exchange recipes, they were horrified to see their young and jovial niece dead. No indications of a forced entrance were present. The walls and floors of the flat were covered in blood splatter. An end table lamp had dropped. The kitchen table was covered with groceries. The kitchen wall had a knife hanging on it, which had an 8-inch blade. There was a sizable bloody footprint that the murderer left in the kitchen. Early on, detectives had believed that a burglar followed Biechler inside or rapped on the door as she was locking the doors. In the weeks prior to her death, Biechler had even told her family and friends that she believed someone was watching and following her. Investigators thought a man who knew her was the murderer. According to autopsy results, Biechler had defensive wounds on her neck, chest, and back from 19 stab wounds. There were clear traces of a struggle and DNA evidence was gathered. Unfortunately, DNA testing would not be used in the US judicial system for at least another 10 years. However, the case wasn't neglected for long as the investigators turned their attention to Biechler's case when another neighboring cold case was solved with the aid of sophisticated analysis from Parabon Nanolabs. Cece Moore, chief genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, utilized the DNA that was extracted from Biechler's clothing at Parabon to focus on possible suspects, particularly individuals with ancestry connected to Gasparina, Italy, a small town in the country's south. However, the murder of Lindy Sue Biechler remained a mystery until 45 years later, when in 2022, US investigators were able to prosecute David Sinopoli, 68, with the murder of the 19-year-old lady, all thanks to the DNA recovered from a coffee cup. The Lancaster County District Attorney's Office said in 1997 that a male DNA profile was allegedly extracted from Biechler's underwear, which was then sent for DNA analysis. 3 years later, the DNA profile was entered into CODIS, a government database used to check for matches with known criminal offenders. The DA's office explained that in this case, there was no match since the person in question was not a known offender and therefore was not in the CODIS database. The Lancaster County District Attorney's Cold Case Unit took over the investigation in January 2019, giving it fresh life. Months later, Parabon Nanolabs was called in to analyze DNA found during the inquiry. At a news conference, Say Moore revealed that Sinopoli had been identified as the potential person of interest. Moore had to employ a new approach to identify the likely suspect because there was no specific genetic matches to the suspect's DNA. Given Sinopoli's Italian ancestry, Moore researched geography and immigration trends, as well as related surnames, and came to the conclusion that the individual associated with the DNA sample had ties to the town of Gasparina in the southern Italian region of Calabria. There were very few individuals living in Lancaster at the time of the crime that were the right age, gender, and had a family tree consistent with these origins, so this allowed me to prioritize candidates whose descent was determined to be exclusively from families with origins in Gasparina, Moore said. It was really tugging at me, so I decided to develop a new approach, she said. There was a very clear migration pattern from a town in southern Italy called Gasparina to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Moore claimed that after poring over Lancaster records for months, she discovered an Italian-American neighborhood club. Those membership cards are listed when people are born. Because I knew that this suspect had roots in this small town Gasparina, I went through all those cards and found the people who had immigrated from Gasparina to Lancaster, Moore said. According to her, she learned that there were 2,300 Italians living in Lancaster at the time of the crime, which she considered to be a manageable amount. About half are gonna be female, a certain percentage are gonna be too old or too young. I knew this person had to be fully Italian from Gasparina or close by, Moore said. I worked through each and every one of those families that had migrated from that very specific town, she said. It was really only possible because of this very unique membership card record collection that Lancaster had. In order to identify the men who had relocated from Gasparina to Lancaster, according to Moore, she compared those membership cards with Ellis Island records and World War I and II draft registration cards. She then sought to identify these men's relatives. I just quietly worked on it on my own time. I didn't know if it would work, Moore said. Moore claimed that after examining every Italian family in Lancaster in 1975, she focused on David Sinopoli, who was then 68 years old. Moore claimed that all of his grandparents were from Gasparina, and according to the prosecution, he had previously resided in Biechler's apartment building. Heather Adams, the district attorney for Lancaster County, stated at a news conference that Sinopoli and Biechler had once resided in the same 4-unit building of the apartment complex, although she did not say when. Adams made no mention of how the two might be related beyond the fact that they were neighbors. However, he added that additional surveillance was necessary before a capture could be made. After realizing Sinopoli had remained local until this day, investigators made the decision to attempt to obtain a DNA sample from him and closely monitored him. In a typical instance, which is frequently featured in the storyline of criminal investigative TV shows, one of the authorities monitoring Sinopoli grabbed a coffee cup that Sinopoli had thrown away at Philadelphia International Airport prior to Sinopoli boarding a flight. The DNA from the coffee cup was examined and compared to DNA from the crime site. Sinopoli was closely observed by investigators through surveillance, and on February 11th, according to the district attorney's office, investigators covertly acquired DNA from Sinopoli from a coffee cup he used and placed in a trash bin before traveling at the Philadelphia International Airport. Adams stated that Sinopoli's identification and arrest were the results of a never-ending pursuit of justice in this case, and that Lindy Sue Biechler was on many people's minds over the years.
Lindy Sue Biechler was on the minds of many throughout the years. Certainly, law enforcement has never forgotten about her, and this arrest marks the first step in obtaining justice for Lindy Sue Biechler and holding her killer responsible.
The arrest, Adams continued, marks the first step to seeking justice for her and bringing her killer accountable. Law enforcement certainly never forgot about Lindy Sue. Lindy Sue Biechler sure got justice, but it came to her 4.5 decades later. Her death was unfair, She had a long life to live, but alas, it was just not destined for her. Maybe all this wouldn't have happened at all had her family and friends paid attention to her being closely watched and followed. This could have been avoided. Meanwhile, Moore deserves loads of appreciation for being dedicated and consistent on this case for decades at a stretch. On July 18, 2022, Sinopoli was charged with criminal homicide in Lindy's murder. According to the Lancaster County Office of the District Attorney, Sinopoli waived his formal arraignment and pleaded not guilty in October. What, in your opinion, should be the punishment for Sinopoli? Let us know in the comments section below. If you liked the video, do make sure to like, share and subscribe to our channel for more such content. See you in the next video.